Hello! Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to PGurus, your favorite channel. So, we're doing the supplementary questions. Let's start. Shadow Showdown. Is it true India has cardboard? India does not have a cardboard military against China, boss. We're capable of inflicting serious damage. The issue is, we don't have the kind of industrial depth that China has. So we can manage to mount an extremely robust and I would think a very decent defense, sometimes even an offense against China for about a month or so. The problem is after that month is over, the industrial supply chains begin to talk. When you produce domestic everything, as China does, that will obviously have an advantage. Shadow Showdown again. One many times Pakistan historian claims that Hindu Sikh landlords in West Punjab were very harsh on the local population. Boss, landlords were harsh on the population. इसमें Hindu Sikh की क्या बात है? I don't know. Today, go to YouTube and search. You will find landlords killing, lynching their own tenants across Punjab. Punjab is still extremely feudal. What does feudalism have to do with Hindu Sikh? Today, all the landlords in Punjab are Muslim. In Pakistani Punjab, in Sindh and Balochistan as well, you don't see that being interpreted as anti-Islam. So, landlords' unrestricted power in feudal areas is the power of life and death. All landlords in all feudal areas, including Europe, were nasty. Sid Dave. Do you think the difference between left and right in India is how they deal with India's Muslims? Are so-called liberals indirectly destroying Indian civilization? Why don't they realize this? No, I don't think so. Because the right talks a lot about Muslims, but we're actually giving a lot more to Muslim education and things like that. The left also talks about Muslims, but if you look at their record in power, they've been quite harsh in dealing with them. I think the difference comes in terms of on one hand, what is the appeasement that they see? The left likes the street power, the violent tendencies of Muslim mobs because they seek to capitalize on it. The right is gives a lot more money to Muslim schools and things like that because you want the breaking of the feudal system that allows that sort of street power to go unchecked. So that is the one level, but at the other level, in fact, at the security level, you'll actually find the left can frequently is, except in Kashmir, much harsher on Muslims in dealing with them. And our liberals indirectly, well, I don't think they're destroying Indian civilization, but they're definitely weakening the state. And they don't realize this because they think that the future that they promise is genuinely a better future. Next. Jackson, what is your view of the future when Justice 𝗣𝗚𝘂𝗀𝘀𝘀 is going to become the CJI? For individual liberties, left or right, very good. Remember, he also supported Arnab Goswami's right to say what he did. I think the issue is when you start uh, drinking too much of the wokeism Kool-Aid and start applying that to your judgments. So you will see liberalism gone amok to the fact that it is incompatible with the third world reality of India. Liberalism, classic liberalism is great when there is great state capacity when you're in industrial power. Where the state has the monopoly on violence. It is not great in a third world country. And the problem with 𝗣𝗚𝘂 is not his sort of woke leanings. It is more that he is born to the elite, moves in elite circles, and believes that the first world reality of the elite is the reality of a large section of the Indian population who are, in fact, the vast majority of the Indian population who live a third world reality. Next. Agniv Ray, do you think Didi has improved the conditions of West Bengal? No. As compared to the left era where West Bengal was actively deindustrialized? No. She's not been attracting investment. She's not been attracting manufacturing. She's not been attracting a lot of things. It is static. There has been no particular improvement or otherwise. It's more of the same. Remember, she basically outlefted the left. Next. Shubham Satpute. Why Vedanta Foxconn ditched Maharashtra to Gujarat? I don't know. I suspect it's mostly because Gujarat provides much better incentives, much more stable electricity, etc., to all things that Modi started off in Gujarat. Remember, since then, Gujarat is technically the chief minister doesn't have much power there. Modi still controls a lot, and all that stuff for attracting investment that Modi laid in place in Gujarat, especially government stability, which there was none of before Modi. Uh, that's what led to this. Next. Levi Ackerman, how did America become masters in playing geopolitics in the world? Why Britain failed playing geopolitics like America in the 70s? First, it was a similarity with the British and it was a difference with the British. The similarity with the British was that they believed in primary research. They didn't just adduce, if we go in and shoot at them, the opposition will just end. No, they would go there, they would do systematic research. They spent a long time doing research on every single place that they went into, very systematically collecting intelligence, etc., which is one of the hallmarks of Western civilization. The Romans used to do it, the Byzantines used to do it, which is why they lasted as long as they did. That is how both Britain and America became great. How did Britain fail where America has till so far succeeded? Is that Britain did mercantilism, America did capitalism. What is mercantilism? Mercantilism is where you control areas in order to keep them as captive markets. America did not keep captive markets. What it did was capitalism. If somebody can produce the same thing cheaper, you shift production there and we will make our industry move on to something even higher value in production. And that kept on increasing. And see, it was generating so much wealth, it was willing to share that wealth. Britain simply wasn't willing to share that wealth. So Britain also liked too many dependencies. America believes in strong allies, not too strong, just strong enough. Strong enough that they can fend for themselves, not strong enough that they can challenge America. Britain didn't do that. See, except with, say, France, uh, they never accepted it, and they accepted it too late, by which time there was no coming back. So that was the main similarities and differences in all of this. Raghuram Chadalavada. If Democrats in the US are more anti Indian than Republicans, how come many Indians end up joining the Democrat Party and support it? Very simple: validation. The Republicans will not give you validation. The Democrats will. You will be celebrated, you will be feted, you will be your own sense of insecurity and weakness. You're not fitting into society. Oh, we accept differences, come join us. Whereas you look at the Republicans, I mean, the first basic Indian representatives of any repute, which were the governors, were Republicans, both Nikki Haley and Piyush Jindal, right? So this was one of those standard things where the Democrats are very accepting of general differences, ethnic differences, caste differences, whatever, but they're not accepting of ideological differences. And in that sense, the requirement to conform is a lot less, personally. The Republicans, on the other hand, are a lot more, speak English and support guns, be anti abortion, and you can do whatever. That's not something that Indians seem to be able to do. They're not terribly culturally compatible. And when they become culturally compatible, they live in urban areas. Overwhelmingly, Indians are urban and they want to seem to be fitting in with the macro narrative. The same reason Indians never made a consistent stand against, the Delhi Sultanate or the Mughals. All the Brahmins would go join the Sultanate administrations and the Mughal administration. Why was that? It's the exact same thing. Harshit Oja, your take on light combat heli LCH? I'm not a big fan of it, clearly. Right? We produce too little, too late, too backward, not up to scratch enough. The equivalent of this has been in production in Italy for a very long time. Turkey has taken on production rights and they're producing the same helicopter. Now, Turkish industry is way ahead of us. They didn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel. And the Turks have made a big export success of their light combat helicopter. Why didn't we? We could have taken the import licenses, indigenized it, and all of that. We did not. We started this entire thing up. It's still very, very backward by any standard. Next. Raghuram Chadlavada. Why is the GOI taxing everyone so much? Because it's an extractive government. They have their social schemes and all of that to meet, and you're the milk cow. Unfortunately, you're being treated exactly the way dairy cows in this country are treated. They don't care if your udders burst, if you're forced to keep breeding every cycle, every fertility cycle. They don't care if it kills you off quickly. This is how they are, because this is what socialism leads to. Best of luck to you. Why are they taxing individuals? They don't seem to be rewarding the middle class families. Correct, they're not, because you're a cash cow. And you're the captive vote bank, because you will not vote for taxes, you will vote for Hindus, for Hindutva, especially when the opposition is a joke. So you don't even have an alternative. Voting for the Congress is not going to be much better, because if anything, the Congress is probably going to tax you even more and be pretty damn anti Hindu. Next. Cadbury, where do you see India in 2040? The same as it is in 2020, not much way ahead. Way problems are rising in the country's 1.9 trillion GDP, best India can offer. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it is. We're not moving anywhere. Work ethics and discipline are inculcated. It's kind of like a chicken and egg question. You first get in manufacturing and fix the regulatory issues around manufacturing, fix the tax issues around manufacturing, and then the work ethics and discipline come automatically when you have hire and fire laws and things like that. We don't do that. We keep asking the philosophical chicken and egg question before deciding to go ahead with something, right? You can't have uh, worker discipline before manufacturing comes, unless, of course, you're a totalitarian state where you're uh, highly disciplined agrarian workforce like China was, which then got transmitted into industry. Next. Sambhav Jain, you recently mentioned that the US had tested 6th-gen jets. Any gossip? No, there's nothing. And yes, directed energy weapons seem to be, we think, because it's still very classified information, nobody really knows. We don't even know what the shape of it is. But that is basically one of the key markers of a sixth generation fighter jet. And I do not classify it. This is classified by convention. It's usually America that sets the convention. RD, is it logical and feasible for India to go for a squadron of F-35 rather than 126 MRCAs? No, boss, it would not, because the greatest advantages of F-35 happen when it works as a system of systems. You don't just buy an F-35. You have to have everything synchronized to it. You need to have a completely Western air defense system, a Western maritime system, a Western anti-aircraft system, etc., so that they talk to it perfectly. Otherwise, you're not going to get your bang for buck for the F-35. So think of it this way. It's like buying the F-35 itself is like giving a Ferrari to a college pass kid who's never driven a car, who's just got his driving license. He's not going to explore the Ferrari as he should, enjoy it as he should, be able to drive it as he should, because driving a Ferrari, other than the show off value is great. साले देख मेरे पास Ferrari है, Ferrari ओए होए बल्ले बल्ले. This anybody can do. I'm not talking about the show off value. What is the utility of the F-35? It is that racing, that precision driving, the speeding, all of that comes with it. And invariably, this kid will probably not know how to drive it and end up dead. It's exactly like that. TJ, INC, which was once perceived as the Hindu party by Muslims, became most brutal for Hindus. It will eventually happen with the BJP. Yes, I do believe so. That is a natural process. And I think, yes, especially now that, before, if you read Nalan Mehta's book, he shows you before the BJP to RSS ratio used to be 1:1. Today, the BJP to RSS ratio is 28:1. The BJP's dependence on the RSS will end. And at that point, in order to get more and more seats when it alienates one section to make up at another section, it will slowly. It'll take 30, 40 years maybe, but eventually, yeah, it will. Next. Indian 109. What might be the effect on Indian property prices if all flats and homes are linked to Aadhaar cards? Very good question. I would think it would reduce the value of the market by at least 50-60%. More so if you had laws regarding builders not being able to build unless they sell 80 to 90% of current projects. Most of the market is completely unoccupied, especially in the Gurgaon area and things like that. And if you don't do that, if both of these are combined, so one gets rid of the benami, the other gets rid of pointless building and market holding, in which case you will have a very significant impact on property prices. No, the Modi government has no such plans. Next. Shadow Showdown. Do you see trad becoming dominant in Hindutva? They have a fan club for having Mohan Bhagwat. They have a fan club for hating Mohan Bhagwat for meeting Muslim leadership. Two best espionage. Okay. Do you see trad becoming dominant? No, I absolutely do not. They can have, see, social media tends to amplify uh, extremist voices. That's fine, but they are nowhere near becoming dominant. If anything, the government hates them, because the point of Hindutva is to end caste discrimination within Hinduism. In fact, the fans that you find of this thing are people like Devdutt Patnaik. If you notice, he tweeted something really dumb. He's very dumb, but he tweeted something very dumb about everything except one caste yesterday or day before. uh, you know this is the trad point of view, and he is basically fundamentally a trad at some fundamental level. That's what he wants to see the BJP as. The BJP hates trads because you can only have Hindutva when there is one Hinduism. Not one Hinduism in the sense of homogeneity, but one Hinduism where people's internal differences are vastly reduced compared to their external differences. So no, I do not see them becoming dominant in Hindutva, because let's call trads what they actually are: absolute vicious, nasty, toxic castists. Best espionage spy books, I don't know. I don't read espionage spy books. I only read real stuff. But the real stuff that I would recommend is Afghansy, which is about the covert war that the CIA waged in America against the Russians in Afghanistan. And the second is the history of the Mossad, Rise and Kill by Ronan Bergman. Lovely book. Read it. It's truly astounding. Yeah, those two. Next. What's up? Can India survive Western sanctions if somebody decides to take POK back? First, the question should be, can we take POK back? The answer is no. Can we survive Western sanctions? I don't think the West will actually sanction you, because they don't really care. They only care about what happens in Europe. And does the army have supplies to and endurance to fight a long war like in Ukraine? No. Against smaller countries, sure. Against Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Pakistan, sure. Against China, no. Next. Shubham Satpute, where the living standards in Mahajanapada is equal with Indus Valley? No, no. We know this for a fact, that the levels of urbanization were significantly less than they were in the Indus Valley. In fact, it's almost urban planning at that point was very low, whereas the Indus Valley was about some urban planning where the Romans. And it only lasted in classical Rome. Byzantium didn't have that level of urban planning and things like that. So, no, it was not. Next. Shivam Satpati, hey, do you think Tipu Sultan was secular? Absolutely not. For his realm and outside territory, would attack Kafirs? No. See, this giving, I can show you Aurangzeb gifted things to temples as well. That doesn't make Aurangzeb secular. And just because Tipu Sultan gifted things to temples doesn't make him secular. He's a horrible, nasty character. Next. Partha Pradeep Saikia. The future of Himanta Biswa in national politics, boss. He has a very bright future in national politics. I suspect at some point he might be the first Northeastern Prime Minister we have. And he is a doer. Remember, he's from the Congress. He understands power. Unlike the BJP, who does not understand power completely as Himanta does. He speaks well, sure, but he does on the ground. Where I want to see a lot more is economics, but aste I guess. Let's see. Hope. Next. Karthik K. Why was lapis lazuli so valued? Rarity and beauty. It's a lovely stone. It's very hard to get that kind of a natural hue anywhere. So and at that time sapphires went. Sri Lanka basically wasn't. We have no instances of Bronze Age Sri Lanka, which is where the vast majority of sapphires come from. So it was purely, I guess, it was the sapphire of its days, and the blue was considered, the color of the skies and things like that. So it had uh, all of that going for it. Next, Rohit Subramania, your thoughts on Turkish CB reducing rates while other CBs are increasing rates? Well, Turkey needs growth. One of the only ways you can do it is through, trying to get people to borrow more and set things up. The issue is it's not going to work because what Erdogan invested in was a lot of infrastructure growth. He essentially borrowed the China Lebanon model: build infrastructure, and business will come in. It was not coming in. So that was that. And Erdogan's prospects, it does not affect Erdogan's prospects because he is dependent largely on the Anatolia, which is to say Asian Turkey, the backward part of Turkey's voting population, away from the coasts, which is very religious and will vote for him irrespective. Next. RK, is Putin serious about the nuclear threat? See, when you say serious, I don't know what you mean, but will he use it when push comes to shove? Sure. In this situation, is he going to use it? I don't think so. Not right now. Let's see how the winter offensive goes. Russia attacks in winter. Russia is at its greatest advantage in winter. Let's see how this winter goes. Then I'll tell you. If the winter goes Russia's way, the threat of nuclear usage comes down. If the winter goes Europe's way, then the threat of nuclear usage goes up. Next. Sri Saxena, where European pagan faiths are as tolerant towards atheism as Hinduism is. See, we don't know. We don't really know. Because there was certainly no requirement for compliance, but there is no real literature about atheism. So we don't really know. Right? They did expect people to be culturally religious. You have the Romans did, the Greeks to a lesser extent, but they did. I mean, they did expect you to take part of it as a civic religion. In fact, you could argue that at their core, they were either atheist or agnostic because it was meant to be about community. It wasn't about spiritual. They did not even have a concept of spirituality in that sense, right? So it depends. We never really had an atheist thought process at that point of time. But we know there is something like proto-atheism in Greece, and Greece at least, the Greek schools. But they weren't really explored because it was seen as a civic faith. It's like having faith in the constitution kind of thing almost. So see, it's very hard to differentiate the strains out there to give a very clear answer to this. Next. Bharatiyan Bharatam, what is your assessment of TN government's activities in the banning of the RSS parade? Boss, this TN government, Karunanidhi became very religious towards the end of his life, and he wasn't doing this. It seems that Stalin still needs to mellow down. Everything with this government is going down the drain. I really don't know why. I thought the DMK had turned a new leaf. Clearly, it hasn't. But it is what it is. They're back to rabid DK style anti-Hindu. Best of luck. Let's see. I think their anti-Hinduism is a big reason why Annamalai is attracting big crowds. Next. Bharati in Bharatam. Have you read Snakes in the Ganges book by Rajiv G? Not yet. I'm looking forward to reading it soon. Next. Karthik Sharma, recently read the US is planning to ban dual citizenship. Not happening, boss. Too much of their economy is dependent on dual citizenship. It's simply not going to happen. Will this impact the Pakistani elite that buys? Like I said, it's not happening, so don't worry about it. Next. Venkatrama Muthusamy, do you understand what is the Dravidian model of governance? No, I do not. As I understand it, the Dravidian model is socialism with a caste twinge, but that's not a governance model. So if you understand what it is, congratulations to you. But that's my understanding of the Dravidian political model. They don't have a governance model. Next. Jay Krishnan Lal. Is it high time to pass a law to have minimum education qualifications for MLAs? And if so, what should be the minimum education qualifications? See, this is again a chicken and egg situation. You pass that, they will get fake degrees. There's nothing you can do about it. And then bribery for degrees will go through the roof. This is the reality of it. MLAs will start up, they might not have an education, but they'll start up a college in their name, which will give them a degree. What do you do then? I don't think it'll work. Next. Karthik Sharma. Abhijit Das argument is that Choras are Telugu like the Korean Empire is Indian. Um, Look, the Choras, the Gangas, the Pallavas, again, you're looking at it from a very modern lens of a Telugu identity, a Tamil identity, an Odia identity. In those days, a linguistic identity was very, very fluid. They saw themselves like, like European kings who used to intermarry, like German princesses used to marry into every house in Europe. They saw themselves as Hindus, marriage compatible, etc., etc., etc. You're imposing a modern way of looking at it at that time when there was absolutely no Telugu chauvinism, Odia chauvinism, Tamil chauvinism. It didn't exist at that point. So, this notion that it existed is just wrong. So the basis, when I heard this argument, I was like, what the hell, man? It's a joke. Next. Sandy 17 October. Why do all Indians want US European citizenship even though India is the best country in the world? Is it the best country in the world for who? I think for most poor people who have to struggle, people who don't get into colleges and things like that, they would any day prefer a European citizenship for their kids than here. I mean, have you even looked out of your window? Where do you live? Sorry, boss, disagree. Next. Levi Ackerman, question to both of you. Is it true that de-dollarization is going to happen in the world? We're beginning to see it. It'll be a very, very long, slow process, maybe 50, 60 years. In 50, 60 years, we will adapt. The problem is if de-dollarization happens rapidly. It isn't, and you adapt. You'll probably go back to the gold standard if there are too many currencies around. And that's perfectly fine. I would much rather have something pegged to gold reserves than to debt, which is a very, very finicky thing to have. Next. Shivam Sharma, do you think Pramod Mahajan would be PM today and not Modi if he had been there? No, I do not think so. Pramod Mahajan was great at certain things. I don't think he would have been able to match up to the electoral prowess of Modi. Next. Gaurav Kataria, what reforms do you think Indian farming needs? Well, we need to be moving towards things like hydroponics and commercial farming, less soil usage, much greater concentration in a much shorter footprint, 90% smaller footprint, exponentially increased production. How do you recover a field after heavy fertilizer use or heavy damage? Well, one of the methods is Terra Prato, which you get in South America, which we still don't know how it's made, but you import it and it kind of self multiplies in a way. That's one of the fantastic things. You allow forests to grow, you allow nitrogenous crops to grow. Uh, and can India become an agricultural powerhouse? Of course, any country can become an agricultural powerhouse. The point is, you need to make it fundamentally commercial farming. You have to disincentivize subsistence farming and incentivize commercial farming. Right now, you are incentivizing subsistence farming and disincentivizing commercial farming. Usse kuch nahi hoga. Next. James Rocker, India versus Vietnam, probably. India just in sheer numbers, but I think Vietnam will reach middle income economy by in the next 15 to 20 years. India will not. Next. Guru Prasad, what are the chances of Russia losing occupied Ukrainian territory? Well, it's stabilized, no? There's no further Ukrainian offensives happening anymore. End game for Putin, sure. Russia, like I said, does not tolerate losers as its leaders. It doesn't mind brutal, nasty dictators as long as they win, but it will not tolerate even the most benign fellow if he ends up being a loser. And Beshak, out of the blue, some YouTube claimed Genghis Khan was pro-Indic. He wasn't pro-Indic. There is no evidence to show that he was pro-Indic. It's just that he did not invade India. Why? Because he had its hands full with China and Persia. These were two great empires at the time, and he was too busy with them. It was more, and the Persians gave him a lot of trouble. He could not complete the conquest of China, and those would have been his priorities. He wasn't going to extend into another battlefield, which was going to give him trouble again before sorting out the first two battlefields. Sarang Dilip. Do you consider any dictator in the last 200 years or so who have been better than democratic governments in overall upliftment of a country, human rights included? Lee Kuan Yew, Park Chung Hee, uh, not in human rights, of course. Chiang Kai shek, for sure, Chiang Kai shek, and his son Ching Kuo. Yeah, these would be people who. Augusto Pinochet, not in human rights, but definitely otherwise. Francisco Franco, Spain. He took Spain from being the poorest country in Europe to being the 10th biggest economy in the world. Nobody wants to talk about it because it's not nice attributing good things to dictators, but he did. Of course, a lot of the human rights record leaves a lot to be desired, but yeah, sure. Next. Rana Ayub. Recently traveled to Europe with parents and had a not so pleasant experience at Paris airport. Really? How sad. Boo hoo hoo. Sorry, did you travel or did Rana Ayub travel? That's the question. If you traveled, I'm sorry. If Rana Ayub traveled, then I'm ready. I congratulate the French. Slower than Sarkari office, so were many tourist places in Paris. Is European tourism overhyped? Yes, it largely is. European airports are nasty. European immigration is nasty. They're slow. They are horrible. Uh, uh, it's difficult to get around. There's all kinds of shit happening with Europe, and you really need to know what you're doing to get around there. So yeah, uh, but I know how to get around in Europe, so it's very easy for me. But it's not easy for somebody who hasn't been going to Europe over and over again. The thing was, I got shielded from the nasty experience because I just was going to monuments direct in and things like that when my parents had to deal with all the visa issues, the immigration issues and all of that. And by the time I was old enough, I would already experienced all of it, so it was easy for me if you get to know. But it's kind of like India as well. India is not an easy place to get around, so I just put it down to cultural differences in that sense. Next. Siddhave, when was the modern Hindu identity formed? Very good question. I would say embryonically with Shivaji, or even with the Vijayanagar Empire, Harihara and Bukka, but hard to pinpoint because the two ideas are substance and salience. Did substance occur under Harihara and Bukka? Yes. Did it occur under Shivaji? Yes. Did salience occur? I'm not too sure. I think it really starts off with Savarkar. I personally, I would say, when you say modern, I would say Savarkar. And that is when you identify as a group distinct from other groups. And Hindu Buddhist identity, well, they did. I mean, you even have the Shaivite and Vaishnavite identity. There's a lot of Shaivite, Vaishnavite fights that happened during the Chora Empire. But they did have, it was more like an internal struggle, really, because Hindus and Buddhists at that point weren't all that different. It was seen as another school within each other. Again, very hard. See, again, we extrapolate modern realities back then, which is very hard to do. Next. Loop Block. US carries out lots of operations under Title 50 directed by POTUS top exec. Do you think recent killings? No, I do not. It's hard to say who killed them out and things like that because there's an unusual number of ISRO scientists being killed. But there's a lot of people with reasons to do it. Plus the Europeans, the Russians, the Chinese, the Pakistanis, the Americans. Yeah. No. Next. Suresh Gupta. Hey, question to both of you. Will Vietnam become an industrialized country? Yeah. Vietnam exports HDI tourism, increasing in opinions on its future. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's maybe 15, 20, maximum 25 years, it'll be industrial. Sure. Industrial middle income, not industrial high income. Next. David the Goliath. Why do some Sikhs feel alienated from India? Well, because of what happened in the 80s. You can be completely indigenous and still be alienated. It doesn't matter. Okay. Uh, Look, what is a legitimate or illegitimate grievance? We all know what happened in Punjab. It was nasty. It was nasty on both sides. And if somebody chooses to look only at the crimes of the other side and not their own crimes, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, there's literally nothing you can do about it. It can't be a one-sided forgiveness. It has to be forgiveness from both sides, an acknowledgement of crimes and criminality on both sides. Next. Karthik Sharma. Did Zubair fail or refuse to use his fact-checking skills to verify the news about himself? In what context was this, Karthik? I don't get it. Sorry. Next. Siddhave. I saw the map of Khalistan released by the Khalistanis. It includes all of Punjab, HP, Delhi, Haryana, parts of Rajasthan, UP. Do they realize Hindus will be like 80% of the population? Sweetie, have you seen that Gurwant Singh Pannu or whatever his name is? I'm telling you, there is a huge fight within the Indian government because everybody is accusing the other agency of him being their agent. IB accuses Gurwant Pannu of being a RAW agent. RAW accuses Gurwant Pannu of being an IB agent. Somebody else accuses someone else of this. They're a joke. Please don't take this shit seriously. And if Gurwant Singh Pannu and people like that are the height of their this thing, and Sidhu Moosewala and Sidhu Moosewala watchers are, you're not going very far, are you? Next. Bharati in Bharatam. What do you think about the Gati Shakti initiative? I don't know what that is. Next. Why is MEA taking pot shots against the West now? Because that's all they can do. That's all they can realistically do because they were shitting bricks. Notice they never took these pot shots in the first 3-4 months of the war when the West was very angry. It's only when, all the trouble started accumulating that they took pot shots at the West. It's fine. I mean, this is what weak people do. When you're faced with a bully, you run away and hide. And then when the bully is in trouble, then you come out and start giving him trouble. And that's why you get beaten up badly later on. But best of luck. Next. Shashank Sharma. Hi, sir. Last time I asked about Hyksos. The book Eden, Egypt, and Tempest and Exodus give compelling evidences ignored by historians. Really? I don't know about that. I still stick to what I said about the Hyksos, which is Semitic people, but definitely nothing to do with the Exodus and crap like that. I'm sorry. These are pseudo-historical theories, and I don't believe in that. Next. Ronnie S. Why did India not insist on partitioning Sindh? Several Hindu majority districts were contiguous. Hindus there are suffering. They went, look, it was being done so fast, mostly because of Mountbatten. They settled, they wanted a quick, painless partition. They were only willing to accept division into Punjab and Bengal because of their agricultural produce at that point of time, which was enormous. Sindh wasn't economically that important at that point of time. It was really that simple. Next. Sid. Do Hindus, Zoroastrians have a common origin? Yes. Rig Veda, Avesta, the Avesta, the oldest part of the Avesta, the Gathas, they both talk about the drying up of a river. Okay, Hapta Hindu there, Sapta Sindhu here, and so, the entire story of moving east, who is it? Bhagiratha. Praying to Shiva and the Ganges coming down, which is the movement, which is believed to be the movement to the east, and their movement west. They actually very specifically mention the drying up and their movement out. Indo-European and native Indian religions, yes, it is. Old Vedic Hinduism is almost purely Indo-European. Modern Hinduism, Shiva, Vishnu, Parvati, is an admixture of the old with the new. Not new, but the native, for want of a better word, shamanistic cults. All about climate change and nations. Why India doesn't manufacture watches as costly as Rolex? Again, it's a human factor training. I mean, Rolex is still quite a pedestrian watch. You need to be looking at things like, FP Journe or Alanga and Zona and Patek Philippe and things like that. Do you know how much an average watchmaker in Alanga and Zona or Patek Philippe get paid? There is one Indian company doing that kind of stuff. I hope they succeed. I forget their name, um, but one company is making very good watches. Uh, I will, in fact, when we record PGurus, I will tell you the name of these people. They are doing very, very good work, Western quality and uh, uh, style complications and things. The issue always is, will an Indian manufacturer pay a similarly skilled watchmaker uh, that kind of money? And will Indian society allow you to take pride in being a watchmaker? Because here, once an engineer gets a certain level of qualifications, he doesn't want to do physical job. He wants to become a manager, not do anything physical. That's the issue. Next. Ronnie S. Did St. Thomas ever visit India? Uh, yeah, I think it's fair to say. You may think so, but the general evidence seems to be, yeah, he did. Next. Druig ET. US destroyed entire modern. They didn't destroy the entire modern world with course, boss. Globalists are cornering Putin to use nukes. Again, it's his own choice. I think you give too much agency to America. And no, India is not ready to side with anyone, least of all Russia. Next. Tapa Biswa. What's going to the status of the Indian economy and poverty by the end of 2023? Nothing much. It's going to be the same. Look, just generally, for the next 40, 50 years, nothing much is changing in this country. Next. Shadow Showdown. I'm fascinated by your communication skills. Is it natural? It came by practicing? No practice, just meeting lots of people, moving around, talking to great people, etc., etc. Which countries has the best commandos? There's no such thing as the best commando because each training emphasizes different things. The basic thing about a commando, remember, is the amount of training you put in. So, an extremely high level of human investment. And number two, the intelligence you gather. Even the best commando, if he's fed bad intelligence, is going to end up being a disaster. So, it naturally you would say NATO plus say Israel maybe would have the best commandos because they are so intel focused and human quality focused generally. Yeah, next. Chaitanya ji, why urban Hindus have adopted a one child policy? Well, they haven't adopted a one child policy. It's just they want to invest in their kids' education. They want to give a kid a great life. And at the cost of living, it requires fewer children. That's how it works. I don't think Hindus, while giving birth to people, are looking at electoral power. You tell me one husband and wife who will say, हाँ मेरे बच्चे सड़ेंगे रास्ते पे पर वोट बैंक बनेंगे. Seriously? I mean, what mother and father thinks like that, boss? So obviously not. And it's not a loss of electoral power, it's a gaining of economic power, which is a very good thing. And they will not send their kids to military police. Well, a lot of them do. A lot of them still do, generally across the world, without exception across the world. The people who send their kids to military and police are lower income, blue collar folks across the globe, unless you have national service like in Israel, where stellar military service is compulsory to becoming a electable politician. If you do not have a good military record, you simply will not become nobody's going to vote for you. Impact on national security. Well, our national security is a joke. You have high levels of security illiteracy across the board. There's nothing you can do about it. Next. Look. How come all of a sudden Pratt and Whitney engines gained a significant upper hand in terms of tech, while all five collaborating for decades? Well, Pratt and Whitney also collaborates, but these are strategic investments. It's investment in slow, small technologies which cumulatively have a big effect. Pratt and Whitney invested very, very well. Uh, G fell back. Rolls Royce fell even further back, and the rest kind of Safran especially never really took off. They were too comfortable. They stayed in their comfort zone, whereas Pratt and Whitney used to be It wasn't one of the two big ones. Like about 20 odd years back, it was GE and Rolls-Royce were the big ones. They were too comfortable in their seat, and Safran was too comfortable being in its francophone kind of environment. The French were the best. We're happy with our market share, and that's it. Pratt and Whitney was sort of the odd man out that had to make good investments in order to take over, and they made several good investments. Good question, by the way. Next. Bloke. There was a rumor that not only Russian Saturn but Rolls-Royce GC also seem diminished performance in Indian weather. No, that's not true. Russian engines have huge problems in tropicalized climates, but Rolls-Royce and GE do not. They absolutely do not. If you ask the Singaporeans, the Emiratis, and things like that, they're very happy with Rolls-Royce and GE performance. The Pratt and Whitney, remember, even the performance parameters you're talking about are fractional. They're fractional, which add up. So it is those fractions that determine a contract sometimes. And generally, there is also a need for diversification, because sometimes if there is a catastrophic flaw discovered in a Pratt and Whitney design, you need to have other engines in your fleet to operate them as well. So it's minuscule differences, but Rolls-Royce and GE are very good in tropicalized conditions. They've invested a lot in tropical conditions. Uh, Russian engines have a huge problem in tropical conditions across the board. Next. Is MBS going too far with his oil policies? No, not at all. He's actually being very wise. He's come late on the diversification scene. The Emiratis moved very early into diversifying away from oil, becoming a services and manufacturing economy. The Saudis just started it now. He needs money to fund it. So, this is why the OPEC is very clear that they're not doing it because of Russia. They're doing it because he needs to fund Saudi Arabia's diversification. And his thing is, you want me to not diversify when you chaps are diversifying your energy to green energy, and you deliberately want me to reduce my income, which reduces my ability to diversify away from an oil economy. For what? For some little shithole country, backward little country, low per capita income, that is allegedly important to you, that he can't see the strategic worth of. Why is he going to do that? And look, MBS, assassination of freedom and democracy, he's probably made Saudi Arabia more accountable and more free than ever before. So, one Jamal Khashoggi does not equate to democracy in general. Next. Sandeep K. Given Lenin turned against Russia, that too in wartime, of course he's a traitor. Of course he's a traitor. Who said he wasn't? Total traitor. Bose and Japanese atrocities in the Indian islands. Yes, of course, Bose was complicit in a lot of Japanese atrocities against Indians. We don't want to talk about these things, but yes, it was true. Does that make him a traitor? No. Because for him, it was, these guys aren't cooperating with us, therefore. And this, was a lot of commentators used to talk about this, that if colonialism is the only choice we have, we'll choose Britain any day over the Japanese, because even at its worst, British rule can't be worse than Japanese rule. So, this was, but does it make him a traitor? No. Remember, Russia turned against his own Russian government collaborating with a foreign enemy. Bose collaborated with a foreigner against a foreigner. How does that make him a traitor? You can agree, you can disagree with his choices, but traitor? No. Next. What's your view on Criminal Tribes Act by the British? Well, look, they had this opinion, and that was that in those days they used to generalize. Today, that kind of generalization is considered bigotry. Basically, they're Nazi laws. All Jews are like this, therefore, whatever. I haven't read these interviews about crimes based on signature of XYZ tribe, Sandeep. You'll have to give me sources about this. I'm also going to Google it. I'm fascinated by this, but let's check. Next. Are you familiar with Saudi NEOM and Oxagon projects? MBS comes with very unrealistic and stupid ideas. No. So, this is where, if you notice, in a lot of times I've been telling you how a proper urban development of cities in India can actually provide a huge stimulus and diversification to the economy. So, for example, I live in a 260 square yard plot house, 250 square yard plot house, where you're only allowed to build four. And all the high rises keep moving out of the city, which means that your metro lines and everything have to be much longer. Whereas the greatest concentration should be in the center of the cities, and places like Lutyens Delhi should be far. It is Lutyens Delhi that should be in Gurgaon, and Gurgaon that should be in the center of Delhi. Okay, we have very bad planning. He is trying to fix certain things. So, what will NEOM bring to Saudi Arabia? It will bring a construction industry. Now, you might not think a lot of it, but a construction industry is extremely important, because the kind of construction you're looking at, it gives you a steel manufacturing sector and things, because it's all girder based and things. It gives you glass and electricity manufacturing. It creates the economies of scales at home, where you can start manufacturing these things, high end products here. It creates, things like office products and home products like kitchen appliances, Miele, Gaggenau and things. They're like premium products, boss. What if you created it in India? Why is it that Prestige and Hawkins haven't been able to go up to the next level of this thing? It's sad, no? They should. They have not. Why? Uh, so it's the same reason I keep advocating urban development in India, because it creates economies of scale across the board. They're hardly unrealistic and stupid. They're actually very good ideas. You can argue about the urban development vision, but urban development as a driver of the economy is a very sound vision. There are definitely questions about the sheer length of it, but then if you look at the transport, if that transport plan works out, is it a high risk project? Yes, but I don't think it is unrealistic or stupid. Initially I thought ye kya hai, because it breaks a lot of urban planning norms. But then when you start looking at the rationale, I have lots of friends in Saudi Arabia. When I talk to them, there's a lot about it that makes a heck of a lot of sense. So let's see. Let's see. Is it high risk? Sure. But sometimes you have to take those risks. But does urban development drive, do big urban development projects like this drive a good economy? Absolutely. And do they help diversification? Absolutely. And there's no way he's turning out to be Saudi Papu, boss. Please don't insult him that way. Next. Murli Datta Kuchibhotia. Is the IVC genome the in? I don't know. I don't know. You'll have to ask Anand Ranganathan this. Next. Shambhav Jain, do you think the A10 Warthog is a failure and a relic? No, it's just obsolete, boss. It was a very successful plane. It's just that its job is much better done by precision weapons. Remember, the main thing, the A10 was designed around its 30 millimeter gun, the Gatling gun that you see in the front. It occupies almost 40% of the plane. And these were days when close air support meant strafing. Today, you strafing will kill as many of your soldiers as not as the other soldiers if you use it in a modern context, where you can use extremely small explosive precision guided munitions with much more persistent surveillance from a remote control center like a drone. So it's just obsolete. It was a huge success, and it's absolutely a relic today, sure. But that's like asking me today if the MiG-21 is a relic, of course. So it's like 60, 70 years old. The A-10 is what, again, 50, 60 years old, at least 50 years old. So look, I've not agreed with Pierre Spray for a very, very long time. He has a almost touching belief that somehow technology can't overcome physics. He's literally like the people who, so a lot of his thing is based on the fact that BVR, beyond visual range combat with missiles, simply can't work. I think you have a lot of evidence today to show that beyond visual range combat with missiles can actually work, and work pretty damn well. Example, Pierre Spray is a great proponent of Russian weapons, and the Kulbit and all of that stunts that they do. They got slaughtered in Ukraine, no, the Russian Air Force. So what happened to all of that? Clearly, missiles are hitting aircraft. The Israelis proved that long back. But see, Pierre is fixated with his own mindset. He can't overcome the fact that the F-104 is still no longer a relevant fighter. But yes, IAF thinkers have a very similar thinking to Pierre Spray. Yeah, alas, you're right. Next. Any learnings of the Indian Navy from the Moscow disaster? They should be, but they haven't learned squat. There's a war between Russia and America in the 1970s. Who would have won? Very tough to say. I suspect it would have been a bloody, nasty mess like, the trench warfare of the First World War. Not trench, but nasty and bogged down kind of warfare, because the pendulum started shifting towards America only in the 80s and the 90s. 80s when the digital information took off out there, and 90s when the information revolution took off out there. So in the 70s, it would have just been a horrible, nasty war where nobody would have, where it's impossible to predict who would win. Hmm. Um, just like the Korean War, or well, Vietnam, they won because America lost its nerve, but kind of like that, horrible uh, and impossible to predict. Two, is Israel a white majority European state? Yeah, pretty much so. Very high income, overwhelmingly white. A lot of intermarriage, much more so than Europe. So you'll see a huge amount of Sephardi, Ashkenazi weddings taking place, massive. Uh, but there's also a brownification of white Israelis because of the massive intermarriage. I've never seen a country more where race and skin color are as irrelevant as Israel. I know it's hard to believe, but it really is. Like, it just is. They're kind of completely color blind in that sense. Next. Blunderboy Nehru, car prices in Australia are very high compared to other Western countries. Why don't companies make cars in Australia? Look, it has more to do with taxes. They used to produce cars. They used to be Holden and Ford. Ford shut down, and Holden, which was a subsidiary of GE, which used to take a lot of GE cars. Like, the Maruti 1000 was produced in Australia under the Holden badge. Opel, uh, Vauxhall, all of these were produced under the Opel badge in Australia, under the Holden badge in Australia. A lot of the Hyundai cars, the Chevy cars were produced in Australia under the Holden badge. The problem was the taxes. They were ridiculous. New Zealand any day would be much cheaper. In New Zealand, cars were either half price or two-thirds the price max than they were in Australia. And Australia's ostensible reason was that, we have to keep taxes high to protect our domestic industry. And the domestic industry, car industry, was, I mean, for when I was there, it was 28 million. Now I think it's 32 million population. 32 million to produce your own cars. Is that even economically sustainable? Uh, Over a small European country like Italy or Germany, sure, which have double the population, instead, double, triple the population. But for a country the size of Australia with 32 million people, does that kind of production make sense? I don't think so. So it has a lot to do with market inefficiency within Australia itself. Next. Chaitanya Takle, is USA behind the Iran uprisings? Well, they're adding fuel to the fire, but did they start the fire? No, that was entirely the government of Iran itself. And this is, incidentally, it's not going to succeed. It's an elite uprising. It's not a. You saw mass uprisings in when 2013, 14, 15 maybe, but 13, 14, 12, 13, 14. But these aren't really mass uprisings in any sense of the word. They're student uprisings at best, and they're not really taking off. Next. Om Patel, the economic situation in Britain doesn't look so good. How is that cutting taxes can cause such an economic crisis? Right. This is what happens when, like Britain, you completely divest from manufacturing and decide that services and the financial sector are your big money spinner. Essentially, Britain is a financial fraud market. And so the normal rules of economics, which is when you put more money into people's hands, which stimulates demand, which stimulates industry, doesn't work out there, right? It's a financial market ploy where you think you control the financial markets. Essentially, the financial markets control you. And the financial markets have decided, for whatever reason, that cutting taxes is not a good thing in Britain right now, which is why you see this. This is pure bloody uh, uh, gray zone financial cabals doing certain things. And that's why they have somebody like Rishi Sunak, who's their Tatpunjia doing their bidding. Next. Pat McLaughlin, I believe AIM compares our current IF strategy with a medieval horse import strategy. What does AIM suggest for IF instead? Rationalization. Horse imports were a much more difficult problem than what the IAF, Indian Navy, Indian Army face today. By rationalize karo, you can't have 7 different kinds of aircraft. You have 2 aircraft, one light, one heavy. Okay, you have to standardize the weapon chain, the logistics chain. So have the same engine, one engine on the light, 2 engines on the heavy. Have the same missiles. Even in the missile, why do you need a short range missile IR and a long range missile radar? The Israeli David Sling, it's been tested in air to air mode. They're very happy with it. Uh, uh, will do both your surface to air defense. Without the booster, it will do short range defense. With the booster, it will do long range air defense. When you put it onto a plane, it does both long and short range interception. It's got all three seekers: visual, infrared, and radar, all in one nose cone. It's got dual pulse, so it gives you the same terminal maneuverability that a Meteor does in a much, much, much smaller body. Uh, why don't you do that? Instead, what you're doing, Navy ke liye Barak missile, Army ke liye Spider missile with 2 different kinds of missile. Then you want 4 different kinds of shoulder fired missiles. You have 3, 4, 5 different kinds of anti tank missiles. You have 2 different, now you're going to have 3 different kinds of attack helicopter: LCH, Apache, and the Mi-35. You just can't do this, boss. You buy one kind of helicopter, use it across the board. You can't buy 3 different attack helicopters. You can't have 7, 8 different kinds of. How are you going to generate economies of scale? At the same time, if you're just decided हम 200 attack helicopters खरीदेंगे, either the Euro Tiger, or if you wanted a light helicopter, the Italian Mangusta, which is what Turkey did. How is it that Turkey is able to produce the entire Mangusta from scratch at home and we are not? Or the Apache, whatever. Buy 200 of it and set up the entire production chain. At 200, it makes economic sense for every component pretty much to be manufactured out here. At 400, 500 light aircraft and 200 heavy aircraft, it makes perfect sense to completely indigenize production, especially if the engine for both those aircrafts is the same. You can have the same basic helmet mounted display across your helicopter and your aircraft, and have a full helmet mounted point collimated display done here. You don't want to do that. You want 20 different kinds of air to air missiles, 20 different kinds of air to surface missiles. कुछ तो लॉजिक होना चाहिए यार. There is zero economics that goes into planning, and there is zero. The elected executive simply does not crack the whip on the military, and the military seems to have zero understanding of economics. And even air defense, why do you need so many different kinds of air defense? All multi-source from different people which don't talk to each other, can't really coordinate with each other. करो ना कुछ, नहीं करेंगे. Ultimately, the political executive carries out the managerial function. When you have bad managers, you have a bad work culture, completely indisciplined, that just does what it wants. Next. Chaitanya Takli, is in India also buying renminbi in ruble reserves? I don't know. Next. Ishan Sharma, what are your views on Indian origin Americans like Bobby Jindal? Bobby Jindal is execrable. Really nasty character. Does nothing for India. India really should do nothing for, not that we can do, but anyway, irrelevant, not worth investing in. Nikki Haley, yes, she is quite reasonably in touch with her Indian roots. Would that make her pro-India? I don't know. I don't think any American politician is going to be particularly pro-India in any sense of the word, at least not to the extent that Ilhan Omar is pro-jihadist or Rashida Tlaib is pro-Palestinian. No. Kash and Vivek, I don't know about. But Ajit Pai, who was Trump's information commissioner, I think, was very pro-India. Next. Mitra Mela, lots of Hindu artifacts in British museums and uni storerooms rotting away. Less than 1% of those are displayed. I'm using Freedom of Information Act. What about pre 1947 loot? I suggest instead of doubling up efforts, you get in touch with Anurag Saxena. He does bringing back all these artifacts to India, things that are legally possible. Because the international law is once you know that something is somewhere, you have 4 5 years, I think a 4 5 year window to file the demand for its return. If it goes over that 4 to 5 years, that's it, it's passed. So instead of doing your own FOI and things like that, work with them in getting things back. Next. Divyanshu Srivastava, PF has better induction planning than IAF. Yes. Now IAF says it wants 4.5 or 5th gen. Yes. By the time they come with 6th gen planes, yeah, the India's 4.5 would have arrived. Yeah, it's a joke. Yeah, it is a joke. It's a sad, pathetic joke. Next. Partho Pradeep Hoikia, question to both of you. Himanta Biswa, an aggressive, clear-cut politician or orator with good speaking skills? Clear-cut, strategic politician. You will see the effects of what he's doing 7 to 10 years down the line. He's clearly planning for an electoral dominance for 15 to 20 years, which I think is very, not the electoral dominance bit, but a lot of what he's putting into place now will have huge implications for Assam, huge benefits for Assam 20 years down the line. But you'll start seeing the effects 10 years down the line, 7 to 10 years down the line. Next. Shadow Showdown. We always hear that there's an Abrahamification of Hindus. Yes, but is there a Dharmification of Abrahamics? No, there is no Dharmification of Abrahamics happening. There is first world Abrahamics, which is very kind, gentle, and polite, like, first world societies. In inter-society violence, intra-society violence is not on. You kind of go to your priest more, your Christian priest more like a free shrink, free psychiatrist kind of thing. Third world Abrahamic faiths are extraordinarily violent, like they were during the medieval ages. You see this in Islam as well. In the UAE, like, you're not going to be sent to jail for blasphemy and things like that. It's still not at the level of the West, but we'll get there very soon. And Saudi Arabia is going that same way, thankfully, finally. On the other hand, Turkey was like that, and now it's reversed very badly because Erdogan is just taking it down, 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 down. Iran used to be like that till the Islamic Revolution kind of aborted its industrialization, aborted its entry into high income group states, aborted its entry into liberalism generally, and I mean the good liberalism, not the bad one. And when we do these book recommendations, as and when I find a book to recommend. Next. Santosh Kumar. As money and other paper instruments can be printed at will gold link digital rupees? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Sorry, Santosh. Next. Will family system that taught India about savings help the economy in the long run? This family system is, I don't know what the family system has to do with savings, boss. Savings is a function of disposable income. If the family is big but low income, you will have cumulatively more. But the higher your income grows, the family unit can become smaller with significantly larger amounts of disposable income. So I don't think you're correct is structurally right. Next. Krishna, what should be the new Indian identity? A Hindu state? Interesting. I don't know. But each country has the right to reinvent itself as it deems fit. What should it be? It depends on your state of development. A third world country will imagine itself very differently from the way a first world country will. So, in our current state, if we reinvent ourselves before development, you will find the need for a third Indian republic, which then reinvents itself when it becomes a first world country, or even when it becomes a sort of middle income country. So I'd say wait till you develop and then reinvent yourself. It just saves you a lot of pain. Next. I am in the UK. Will winter be bad with limited food and power cuts being talked about? Yes, unfortunately, it's going to be extremely bad for you. You're probably much better off in India than you are in the UK. Is there a realistic threat of nuclear war? When you say realistic, yes, but how much is the threat? Right now, low. If the winter goes well for Russia, I would say the threat diminishes significantly. If the winter goes badly for Russia, say the possibility of a nuclear usage, of a nuclear detonation increases significantly. Next. 𝗣𝗂𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀, why India does not invest in strategic bombers for China? You don't need it. Tejas Mark II capabilities are doubtful, correct? Why no foreign single engine fighter? Well, ask the Air Force. I've been asking them that question for a very long time now, and I've never gotten a clear answer. But you don't need a strategic bomber. A strategic bomber is extremely vulnerable. It's fine for the Americans, where you go in on the seventh, eighth day of the war after you've neutralized their everybody's air defenses, and then you go in and bomb things. Bombers are extremely vulnerable unless you have extraordinary stealth like the B2, which we do not have. And even there, that kind of bulk bombing, there are much easier ways of doing it. Bombers were very important. Every country needed bombers. India had bombers, in fact. When you did not have precision munitions. In once upon a time, only 1 in 100 bombs, if at all that, used to hit their target. Today, one fighter can take out between 8 to one fighter, one sortie can take out between 8 to 12 targets, which completely obliterates the need for a bomber. No. Next. Prasanna TG. Tala Abhijit, what is the future of UK economy? Not very bright. When you have become, and Margaret Thatcher did this incidentally, she turned it into a financial this thing, but then remember, the reality then was very different. Today, without manufacturing, just being at the mercy of financial forces, you're in an extremely delicate position. I would say India has more strategic autonomy today than Britain has. And if your economy is based on financial markets, when those financial markets collapse, it's going to be like the Great Depression multiplied by 100, because during the Great Depression, remember, at least Britain had manufacturing. Today, Britain does not. Well, very limited manufacturing.